The last words anyone heard from Brandon Swanson were, "Oh, shit." Then silence. An ordinary drive home turned into a vanishing act. What could cause a college student to disappear in seconds, live on a phone call with his own father? In this documentary, we begin at the chilling endpoint and trace the mysterious timeline backward, starting with the night of May 14, 2008. Is it possible for someone to walk off the face of the earth, leaving nothing behind? What happened on the night of May 14, 2008? Let's rewind. The last words, a phone call in the dark. In the early hours of May 14, 2008, a 19-year-old named Brandon Swanson was on the phone with his father, Brian, standing somewhere along a dark, rural road in Minnesota. He had driven his car into a ditch and, unable to free it, called home for help. What started as a straightforward request quickly unraveled into confusion. Brandon tried to describe his surroundings. He mentioned fences, the sound of water, and distant lights he believed belonged to the small town of Lind. We'll see that this belief was fatally off by 25 miles. His father listened, headlights cutting through the night as he searched. But nothing Brandon described seemed to match the world his parents saw from their car. The phone call stretched on for nearly an hour, growing more tense as Brandon and his parents tried, and failed, to find a common landmark. Brandon's voice, steady at first, became edged with frustration as the minutes ticked by. He gave directions, mentioned a gravel road, and described walking along a fence line. But none of these landmarks matched the roads his parents drove. Their attempts to connect, flashing headlights, honking the horn, yielded only silence. The Swansons drove up and down the roads near Lind, but found no sign of Brandon's car, no movement in the darkness, nothing to suggest where he might be. Rural Minnesota at night isn't just empty space. It's a patchwork of hazards. Drainage ditches from the Yellow Medicine River, muddy shoulders, and sudden drops that can vanish beneath the grass. Brandon's only connection was his phone, his father's voice on the other end. At one point, Brandon said, "I can hear water." He kept moving, convinced he was walking toward the lights, certain his father would find him soon. But the more they talked, the more disconnected their realities became. Each new landmark Brandon described only deepened the mystery. His parents, driving in circles, couldn't see or hear anything that matched his account. As the call wore on, the pressure mounted. Brandon's mother later said that at first he just sounded frustrated. But as time passed, his voice shifted, worry creeping in, tension building with every failed attempt to meet up. The sense of urgency grew on both sides. But neither could bridge the gap between Brandon's location and the places his parents searched. Then, after 47 minutes, the ordinary conversation ended in an instant. Brian heard Brandon walking, then a sudden startled exclamation, "Oh, shit!" and the line went dead. There was no sound of a struggle, no crash, just silence. Brian tried calling back again and again, but each attempt went straight to voicemail. That abrupt disconnection marked the last known contact anyone had with Brandon Swanson. To understand why that call ended that way, we need to rewind the clock. Brandon's night started without any sense of trouble. A simple drive that went nowhere. Brandon Swanson's drive home from Canby to Marshall should have been routine. He'd just wrapped up the spring semester at Minnesota West Community and Technical College, celebrated with friends, and decided to make the familiar 30-mile trip east to his parents' house. Those who saw him that night said he seemed clear-headed, joking, and acting like himself. There was nothing out of the ordinary, no sign that this would be anything but a simple drive through the quiet Minnesota night. Yet, around 1:54 a.m., Brandon's plans unraveled. His car ended up in a ditch along a gravel road. The area was dark, bordered by open fields and scattered farmhouses, and the early morning hours offered little visibility. Brandon didn't sound panicked when he called his parents. He explained he'd gone off the road but was sure he was near Lind, a tiny town southwest of Marshall. He told his parents to meet him there, confident he could direct them in. But this is where the first real confusion set in. Brandon's sense of location was completely wrong. He thought he was near Lind, but cell tower data later spun the search 25 miles northwest to Taunton. That one misjudgment sent his parents searching in the wrong place for nearly an hour, driving up and down the empty roads around Lind, looking for any sign, hazard lights, a parked car, even footprints in the gravel. Nothing matched what Brandon described. There were no tracks, no disabled vehicle, no sign that anyone had recently been there at all. The geography of this part of Minnesota can be disorienting, especially at night. The towns of Canby, Marshall, Lind, and Taunton are spread out across a patchwork of fields, with only a handful of main roads connecting them. The most logical route from Canby to Marshall is a straight shot down State Highway 68, a drive Brandon knew well from his daily commute. But somehow, he ended up far off course. It wasn't until investigators traced his phone signal that the search shifted to a gravel road near Taunton. When Brandon's car was finally found, the details only deepened the mystery. The sheriff noted the vehicle was hung up on the top of an incline at the edge of the road, not seriously enough to damage the car, but enough to keep the wheels from touching the ground on that side. There was no visible damage, no evidence of a crash, and no indication of which direction Brandon might have gone after leaving the car. The doors were left open, but the keys were missing. No footprints, no disturbed brush, and no sign of a struggle surrounded the scene. The absence of physical evidence around the car left investigators with few options. The car's location didn't match any of the places Brandon had described to his parents. The only thing authorities knew for certain was that Brandon had walked away from his vehicle into the dark, rural night, with his phone as the only lifeline back to his family. This gap, between where Brandon thought he was and where he actually ended up, set the stage for everything that followed. The search for answers would soon grow much larger, but it began with a single empty car and a trail that faded almost as soon as it started. Searching for Brandon. Theories and unanswered questions. With the discovery of Brandon's abandoned car, the search effort quickly expanded into one of the most extensive in the area. The Lyon County Sheriff's Department coordinated ground teams, law enforcement, and volunteers. K-9 units joined in, working field roads and ditches, while pilots scanned the landscape from above. The only real lead came from bloodhounds, whose scent trail led from the car along rural roads, through an abandoned farm, and eventually to the banks of the Yellow Medicine River. That was enough to focus searchers on the water, since Brandon had mentioned hearing water during his call. The response was methodical. Boats from the Department of Natural Resources combed the river, while all-terrain vehicles and searchers on foot covered the banks and surrounding fields. Sheriff Vizecki personally walked the riverbank for 2 miles every day for a month, checking and rechecking for any sign. The theory that Brandon might have slipped into the river seemed plausible, especially with the dogs losing the scent at the water's edge. But despite the intensity of the search, nothing surfaced. No clothing, no keys, nothing that belonged to Brandon. The river was searched thoroughly, both upstream and downstream, but it never gave up a clue. As weeks passed, searchers waited for the landscape to change. After the harvest, teams returned to the fields, hoping that new eyes or shifting terrain would reveal something missed before. By 2011, the search area had grown to cover 122 square miles, with dogs following possible scents into previously unchecked areas. Still, Brandon's trail stopped cold at the riverbank. The absence of any evidence, no footprints, no personal belongings, no remains, meant every theory remained just that, a theory. The main possibilities were accidental drowning, hypothermia, or foul play. The river theory was tested repeatedly, but the lack of a body or any trace made it difficult to accept as the sole explanation. Some considered hypothermia, since temperatures dropped into the 30s that night, and it was possible Brandon wandered for miles, succumbing to the cold somewhere outside the search grid. Others wondered about foul play, even though investigators found no physical evidence of a struggle or abduction. With no sign of Brandon in the water, on land, or anywhere else, every scenario left more questions than answers. The initial police response also left its mark. When Brandon's parents first asked for help, the Lind police told them it was not unusual for a young man to be missing and that Brandon had a right to be missing. That early resistance spurred Brandon's law, which now requires immediate action in missing adult cases, clarifies the lead agency, and prevents police from refusing a report based on assumptions about intent or criminal activity. Even as official search efforts wound down, Brandon's family kept looking, walking fields, checking riverbanks, and refusing to move on. The community, too, felt the weight of a mystery with no resolution. Despite the thoroughness of the search, not a single clue explained what happened to Brandon after that phone call. The unanswered questions linger, and the silence that followed his last words has never been filled. Brandon Swanson's last words still hang in the air, a reminder that his story never reached an ending. His father's calls went unanswered, and the search for Brandon became a daily reality for the Swanson family. Each night, Annette and Brian keep their porch light on, a small act of hope that their son might return, or at least be found. The family's commitment to keeping Brandon's case in the public eye has never faded, and they continue to push for answers. He remains listed as missing by the Lyon County Sheriff's Office and the FBI's VICAP database, a reminder that the investigation is still active. If you're intrigued by unsolved mysteries like Brandon's, leave your theory below and subscribe for more deep dives. Until someone turns on his porch light again, this mystery waits in the dark. Please like and subscribe to the Buzzworthy Stories.